Thank you, Chairman. And again, we've all said thank you, and we just can't say thank you enough. Our internal gratitude and gratefulness and admiration for what all of you have done on that terrible, terrible day. And you know, I was mentioning to the Commissioner before we came in here, one of the counties I represent has an annual breakfast where all the first responders, emergency management come. It was last week. We had 700 people, and that was almost the entire topic of conversation over in Michigan about what you all did in Boston and how well you reacted and how you responded. And that one of the most heartening things, I think, and anybody that was watching the TVs that didn't have tears in their eyes when they watched all the people on the sidelines as you were exiting the neighborhoods after you caught the second murder, people applauding the first responders. That was a remarkable moment, I think, for every American, and certainly something that none of us will ever forget. And one of the things that Senator Lieberman mentioned when you said the battlefield, you mentioned that Christmas Day bomber. And I just pick up on that because I'm from Detroit, and we are facing a new type of enemy now, something that our country has not faced in the past, who see the battlefield asymmetrically, who see the battlefield in a different way. The battlefield that day was seat 19A of that Northwest flight for that murderer. Attempted murder, and the battlefield then was at the end of the Boston Marathon. And so there's been a lot of talk about information sharing, and I'm very appreciative of the questions and the comments about that. But I guess my question today would be about how, as we go forward, how we can better resource and utilize existing resources for our first responders, not only at 9/11, when we remember it was the first responders who responded, not really the military. In this case, of course, we had the National Guard that were force multiplier for you. And I think as in these days of economic times, perhaps there's a way, and I would ask for some comments on that. How did the National Guard actually meld into what you were doing there? And I ask that because I'm wondering if there's a way, as we are resourcing the National Guard, whose role really has changed and expanded since 9/11, and we all have National Guard units in every state, about doing perhaps joint training exercises with our first responders, all kinds of various things that they may be able to utilize that you could utilize as well. I mean, I've got a big National Guard. I'm just outside of Detroit. We have a big National Guard base there, and they're everywhere, really. Perhaps this is a way that we could have them share even though they're under DOD, really, I think there's a lot of application, things that we are already resourcing through the Department of Defense, through the National Guard, that may have, we could utilize better from training exercises, et cetera, with the first responders. I don't know what you think of that, Commissioner, if you have any comments on that.
I don't know what the national standard is, but I can tell you in the city of Boston and throughout Massachusetts, the National Guard has been at the table for all of our training exercises back to just after 9/11. One of the big roles that they played immediately after was the CBRN detection and having units that could come in and monitor to make sure there were no chemicals or other things that we had to be concerned about in the environment. But the day of the marathon, they were an integral part of our preparation. They had already been deployed prior to the bombing to assist us in our traffic control and security operations. So there were several hundred National Guards people at the scene, and the general came right into the command post, one of the first people to arrive. He was tremendously helpful. By the end of the day, we had over 1,500 troops available to us, assisting our officers in securing, as I described, the most complex crime scene that we'd ever processed in the city of Boston. And those troops stayed on the ground for a 7-day period until that scene was shut down. But more than just perimeter security, they arrived at the scene of the pursuit and brought equipment in, and at one point we needed 3 of our SWAT teams to deploy out to Dartmouth, Massachusetts, and they brought in helicopters to make that happen. Blackhawks came in and took the teams out. The state police have helicopters, but they were nowhere as near as large as what we needed to move people around. So General Rice played a critical role in not only preparation and prevention, but also in response after the incident happened.
I appreciate that. My time is up, but I asked that question. I'm so delighted to hear all of that, because I think that's an area where we can, I think as a Congress, needs to think about melding some of the various things that are happening with the National Guard in response to with the first responders, et cetera. As I'm just, in my own area there, on our National Guard base, we actually have a Air and Marine Wing from the Department of Homeland Security with an operational integration center, which all the information is fed by all the affected stakeholders and then used principally for border security. But we've used the National Guard along the border, but I just think there's something that the Congress needs to think about more. So I'm very appreciative of your answer. Thanks. And I yield back my time.